It's somebody's loved one. That's somebody's daughter. That's somebody's mom. That's somebody's, sister. That's somebody's aunt, whatever, uncle, son, brother. That's somebody's person. And when you're posting these photos online that have the ability to be leaked out into the general public and for them to find them, these family members did not see their loved ones in those conditions. They did not see that site like that more often than not. And so when you are taking these photos and putting them in a public space where anyone can see them, and then they happen upon them, or a friend or family member finds them and then says like, oh my gosh, I found photos of your house after, so-and-so passed, you are opening a massive trauma wound that was not there before this started.
This is the Buried in Work podcast, where we share tips and interview experts to help you simplify estate planning and end-of-life tasks.
Today's episode is a powerful one. I'm joined by two professionals working at the front lines of death care and trauma response. Jess Wakefield and Don Gilmartin are our guests. Together, they're leading the charge on the Dignity in Death and Privacy Protection Act of 2025. It's a proposed federal law that would make it a crime to publicly share graphic trauma scene photos or videos that involve a deceased person without the consent of the next of kin. This is really important stuff, everyone. Now, we're diving into why this law matters, the disturbing stories that sparked it, so it's a little bit of a warning there. If that's not what you're into, you're probably going to want to skip to the next podcast episode. And we're also going to talk about what we can all do to protect grieving families in their most vulnerable moments. About Jess Wakefield, let's talk about you, Jess. You're the Director of Partnerships, Community Education at Better Place Forest, licensed funeral director, celebrant, advocate, 15 years experience. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, let's hop in really quickly. I want you to give people a little bit of your background, and then we'll switch over to Don.
Yeah, so I ended up in the funeral space kind of by accident. I think a lot of us that are not first generations land that way, though. I was working in environmental protection space. I have a degree in environmental chemistry, actually. And I just found that it was a little bit too much like economy driven. And I just wanted something that was a little more reliable and that really spoke to my heart in a different way. And so I ended up meeting up with somebody who worked at a nursing home, took that job. And then when I was working there, a funeral home employee was like, you should come work for us. I think you would be really great over here. And that was almost 20 years ago. And here we are. So I did fall in love with it. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else at this point.
All right. Now let's talk about Don for a little bit. 30 years entrepreneurial experience. You've scaled companies. You run a cleanup services company right now, but today we're here to really focus on your legislative advocacy and the drive that you have to create ethical standards in an often overlooked industry, which is what we're talking about today. Don, what's your story?
Wow. So mine actually kind of rides along with Jess's. That's why we get along so well. So I go back about 20 years plus. My decisions were also economy driven. I wanted something a little more stable. I came from the building and construction and restoration business. And along the way, I found that, sort of cleanups and trauma cleanup aftercare services kind of tied to funeral industry became a real big passion and woke up an animal inside of me. And fast forward, here I am in the cleanup industry of trauma care cleanup. Stumbled upon our topic today many years ago by, this is all sort of part of my own trauma story, if you will. And as I started to feel this and dip into this world deeper and deeper and deeper and just helping people, serving, I got, funeral professionals that were like, do you know that this is going on in your space? And somebody needs to do something about it. And it just became like me. And I met Jess, and Jess is like, we need to do something about this. And here we are.
All right, so let's take a step back. And I want to talk about the proposed legislation. I want to talk about the problem. I want to talk about the solutions. But I think that a lot of people that are listening to the podcast don't even recognize that this is a vertical of the industry that even exists. Mm-hmm. What is trauma cleanup? Let's just create that baseline foundation for everybody.
I love how Jess says it. I'm certainly willing, but Jess, why don't you just kind of share, because you're great at this.
So trauma cleanup would be any cleanup of any site where a death has occurred. So it could be a suicide. It could be somebody who has passed away and was not found right away. It could be a crime scene situation. Any of those are going to qualify as what we would consider a trauma cleanup. unfortunately, when we pass, if you're not discovered for some time and it's 80 degrees outside, that could be real messy. And so there's a lot of steps and stuff that's included in that process. A lot of the times, those technicians that go in there will take photos for insurance purposes and that kind of stuff. And that's the problem we're looking at here, is that those photos end up leaking or they're sharing them with friends and it gets really messy. So that's kind of where this whole adventure started.
So,
Right.
so explain that. Who's hiring the techs to come in? Is it the family? Is it different provider? Is it insurance? Is it the police?
I can speak to that well. The public doesn't know that this is a service that is privately managed, and first responders are a referral source. You can certainly pick up what we do on the net, Google. Funeral professionals will refer, property managers, different types of insurance professionals. And where the commonality here is it's about damaged property. That's where it all starts. It's about a
Mhm.
horrible situation for a family, certainly, that has to be managed. But then in addition, the aftermath, if you will, is in fact damage to property when you have the biohazard fluids inside of a property. And then it transitions to typically, not always, but typically an insurance claim in the home, very similar to a flood or a fire. And that's where it starts to take over. So, you're going out there and the adjusters aren't there yet. And as the industry of cleanup, because it is private, they're cleaning. They're going out there and photo documenting so that the claim can be paid. And
Mhm.
that's where the camera takes over. And that's where some of the damage begins at that moment. There's nothing that regulates the cleanup industry federally. And that is why we're here. There's got to be something that sort of like says, stop it.
Help me walk through the timeline of a call. So let's say someone is found, they've been in their home for 24, 48 hours before they're located. When do the crews come in? When do police get notified? When are the pictures taking place? Is it before before the body is moved, after, both? Let's really get this graphic description because I want people to understand what's going on.
Right. So again, and kind of like funeral professionals are after the fact. So we're kind of considered second as cleanup company. We're considered second responders. Usually, how does it happen? Boy, grandma hasn't answered the phone in a couple of days. What's going on? And then family, maybe from out of town, will say, "Can you?" They have a well check. So law enforcement goes out and does a well check. Upon that, there is often the discovery. Certainly, in the case of a crime scene, there is discovery as well, right? We all know that. But
Hmm.
law enforcement pretty much is the first on scene. And then at that point is where the channels start to go out. Oh, somebody died. They don't know how. Let's call the coroner. Once the coroner has dismissed the case, found out, taken it under care, funeral professionals take over at that point. But then there is this, what about how it happened at the scene going on? And when are photos taken? So law enforcement finds well check, body stays there. Certainly coroner takes photos. Those are photos that are typically not the problem. But what happens is the body is removed and then, oh my gosh, this aftermath cleanup needs to be done. What
Hmm.
what happens? Who does that? Well, that's when a company like ourselves or people like us do it. We come out there, we start to take photos before, and then we have to take photos after. And the after photos often are we've removed carpet walls, done all types of cleaning in our profession. Those are the photos that become
Okay.
the issue. Got it?
And that's really when the Dignity in Death and Privacy Protection Act of 2025. We're going to say that a few times because I want people to remember it, so you can Google it, come to the website, learn more about it. Now, what does that legislation do?
Ooh.
Jess, you're great at this.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jess,
So
you're up.
I told Jess about this one time, and all of a sudden, this fire went off in her eyes, and she's like, "What?
yeah.
What? What?" Yeah,
Well, we'll get into like my why, but you know, the things that specifically are in this that are not anywhere else is the fact that we really are looking for like the prohibit use of any photo without next of kin's like written consent. So that includes in any kind of like newscast, any kind of like educational portion. Like they really need to have permission to be able to utilize that and requiring that there's some level of background check and actual like confidentiality requirements and state like nationwide, like nationwide. Because the problem is that when it comes to taking photos and them leaking onto the social media world is that we're no longer in a state by state problem. This is a nationwide issue because social media knows no boundaries when it comes to state lines. And so I think that it's super important that this is regulated at a national level versus every state kind of having their own rules. Because what happens when takes place in Florida, but the people that are family members discover it in Wisconsin? Like now we've got this multiple state problem when it should just be in federal level.
Now, because this is a national issue, then who's drafting the proposed legislation? Who's supporting it? Who's championing it? Where is it in the process?
We are super early in this process. So so I have kind of created somewhat of a draft that I'm working with a couple of different lobbyists with that are pushing it through people they know that would completely support this. But we are very early in this process.
Are you working with any lobbyists on the Hill right now to try and find support from the local members? And for those that don't know, oftentimes what happens is somebody that is a subject matter expert in the field will draft a brief or draft legislation that is the expert in the field, and then they'll present it to an LA or an LD on the Hill. That then goes up to the chief of staff. The chief of staff reviews it. It then goes to the member, and the member would then, with others or by themselves, present it to Congress. And this is simplified to create a bill. There's a great how to create a bill, legislation
mean,
video.
that
Good
was
for you. That's great.
Yeah.
on the Hill moment.
There it is.
But-
Schoolhouse Rock wins. So
Yeah, Schoolhouse Rock. I love it. Being an attorney in DC, it helps. And
Yeah.
Right.
where are you in that process? Do you actually have draft legislation that's written, or is it still conceptualized right now?
So we have draft that is written. I've got two different people that are pushing it around on both sides of the fence because this is a very bipartisan thing. It is not something that one side is going to be like, yay, and the other one's going to be like, no way. So I think that it's got a lot of support from both sides once we start talking about it. And I think the big thing here is that when you start discussing how photos are leaking, not only of like everyday people, but celebrities, government officials, like every single person in our community has the risk of being a victim of this. It gets their buy-in fast because they're like, I would never want my family to find out about these things. Like, so it's been a very easy conversation to have with representatives. And a lot of people are just kind of like, ooh, how do I get involved?
Well, let's talk about that. So I want this to be personal for people. Don, walk us through one or two of the real life stories. Don't hold back, not that you ever do, that prompted the legislation that really got your attention. Because conceptually, yeah, I don't think that people would appreciate that pictures are out on the internet. But a lot of people also say, why not? They're just photos. Who cares?
Yeah.
Why is this important?
Well, it's important. And unless you've actually gone through it, you feel it at a very, very deep level. And I certainly did. I have, some serious tragedies that happened in my family that have woken up the beast here today. You can't stop me. Experiencing that is horrific when it's, wait, what? I'm dealing with this and now I have to deal with that too? Don't put me in that club. What is probably the most troubling is when you also, by extension, you are doing what you feel is great work. You're on your personal journey to just be passionate about helping people in trauma. And then you kind of get out into the world of a community where funeral service or otherwise is out there, and they start to hear you, Jess, people like us talk about this, and they're going, wait a minute, what? How was I woken up? I was actually woken up by a corporate funeral professional who heard me speak, just in general about my company, just doing what I do in front of funeral professionals. And I didn't even know who she was. And she called me up on a Sunday and she said, you don't know who I am. And it doesn't really matter. But I know you are so passionate about it. You don't even know what's going on in your industry. And this was almost 10 years ago, about 7, 8 years ago. And she said, you'll know me eventually, but right now I want you to understand you're going to lead the charge in this because you've got the passion for it. And this is what's going on. Go to this website, go to this Facebook page. And TikTok wasn't even around back then.
No.
And look what's going on in social media. And I was like, what?
So talk about it. What did you actually see? So give us those examples that hit so home for you that it prompted you to then collaborate with Jess and others to create this movement. And that's really what it's becoming to pass this legislation. So what did you see? Scare some listeners.
I generally, when I publicly speak, I kind of like say, no, I just don't do that, but I'll do it for you because you're asking. But I literally saw death scenes after the body was removed. And if you've ever seen that, first responders certainly see this, funeral professionals see this, but It is horrific. The odors are immense.
Mhm.
What is there between science left behind the body, what just comes out of a body during times like that, not just blood, but anything that is biohazard. And then on top of that, the scenes that are around when somebody might have even, suicided. There's booze sitting there, there's needles, there's
Oh.
splatter everywhere, there's odors and smell. I'm trying to be really discreet because I don't typically do this,
Yeah.
but to paint a picture, there is that. And then when you have a decomp, often if it's on a bed or the floor, the decomp is in the shape of the body. It's just sitting there. However the body lied and started to decompose, that's what you see. And that should never be shown. Period. End of story. It's voyeurism. It's look at me for showing you this. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is privileged information that I get to see and help these families. And that's what I saw. I was like, white sheet, outline of body. What in the hell is going on here? You should never take this out. And there were parts of it that said hashtag blow your nose. Because let's face it, the coroner doesn't always pick up everything.
Hmm.
And when discovered, and you're at privileged information walking in a horrible situation for a family, and you walk into a room to clean up, and then you find a piece of a nose, and then you go take that and put that on Facebook, you should burn in hell.
Okay.
And that's what I saw first time that said, oh my God,
Yeah. And
I
and I
guess it's me.
I think that's a good enough example without us
Yeah,
going too
sorry.
far down that. No, this is
You
what
may have
people
to
need to
edit.
hear.
You may have to edit me,
No
but get
edits.
me
This
started.
is this is literally what people need to understand, that
Yeah.
it's not what you would typically expect. It's not necessarily what you see on television, crime
Mhm.
scenes and everything else. These are real stories with real people. And the argument from people and this is what I understand, part of the argument from people that are posting these photos is that the person's dead. It doesn't matter. What damage does it cause? And
Oh.
and
You
that's
just
why
woke
we're
her
asking.
up.
So here's your platform, Jess.
Yeah, go
What
ahead.
what damage does it cause? I mean, the people are already gone. Why does it matter? And obviously, I don't agree with that sentiment, but I want your
Yeah,
take.
yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the truth of the matter. It's somebody's loved one. That's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's, sister, that's somebody's aunt, whatever, uncle, son, brother, that's somebody's person. And when you're posting these photos online that have the ability to be leaked out into the general public and for them to find them, these family members did not see their loved ones in those conditions. They did not see that sight like that more often than not. And so when you are taking these photos and putting them in a public space where anyone can see them, and then they happen upon them, or a friend or family member finds them and then says like, oh my gosh, I found photos of your house after, so and so passed, you are opening a massive trauma wound that was not there before this started. And so now you've got somebody who's already in the grief process. They've got trauma because this person may or may not have passed suddenly, may have taken their own life, may have done whatever, like whatever happened was already a huge trauma part of their griefs. And now you're adding this whole other part of it where now not only do they have to find out like how bad everything really was, but that everyone else knows about it too. And so
Mhm.
now there's the guilt factor that's going to fall into that place too. And so it creates this mental health whirlwind that is just so unnecessary and so completely not necessary and should be something that they could easily go after somebody over. Because I'm sorry, but if you put me through that kind of trauma, you bet I'm coming after you.
So let's talk about that. It seems like the current legislative system, the legal system that we live in, depending on state, local, federal jurisdiction, oftentimes protects the privacy rights of the living.
Yeah.
Why are there legal gaps that exist? Why don't current laws already protect the families in these situations? Is it just a misunderstanding and oversight? But why?
I
Because
think quickly, Jess, I'll just say
yeah,
this. This has happened so fast. Like social media has really
yeah.
turned our world upside down, right? I mean, like we've gone 0 to 60 since COVID in 5 years.
Mhm.
Forget it. And this is a consumer affairs issue. This is wake up. This is going on. And it's just because the world's moved so quickly. Go ahead, Jess.
Oh, I was gonna say that the reason why people aren't protected once they pass is because they are no longer considered people once they pass. They are quasi property. In other words, they are the property of the next of kin in the legal system to be dealt with in a professional manner, whether that's cremation, burial, whatever the family's choosing, but they're not technically considered a person anymore. All HIPAA laws end. There's not really a lot of protection for somebody once they pass away.
Wake up.
Yeah, it's not great.
You've drafted the legislation, you've received feedback from several other people. Can you talk about the feedback that you've received from families, professionals, lawmakers? What do they like? What do they not understand? What are you still trying to figure out? Because no legislation is perfect. Like what keeps you up at night when you're thinking about this?
Everyone that I've talked to can give me a story about a family that's been affected. Every funeral director I've talked to can tell me a story about somebody who's been affected in their career. The funeral space is very much 100% supportive of this idea. And when we took it to the National Funeral Directors Board, though, they kind of were like, this seems like more of a cleanup company, like industry thing. Let's let them take the lead and then we'll step in as needed. Because we've got a lot of other things legislatively that we have going on in that association right now. So they were like, it's just one thing too many at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it is on the burner for us over there. And I think that I have not received any real opposition anywhere. Like, I've had celebrities speak up and be like, oh my gosh, this is huge, because they are usually one of the bigger groups that are affected by this. You know, the Kobe Bryant story is a big one where photos of him and his daughter were on the hillside, and those leaked into public, world. Like, why? Why was that necessary? So now, his wife and family members have the knowledge of knowing that their lost loved ones are on the internet. Because once it's on the internet, it's not going anywhere, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's findable. And so to me, I don't see any real opposition. The struggle we're going to have is how to enforce. I think that that's going to be the biggest thing. How do you enforce when there's not a licensing requirement to be in trauma cleanup? Like, unlike funeral directors where we have to do a background check and submit our fingerprints and, go through a licensing process, we do not have that on the trauma spectrum at all.
And so when it comes to legislation, and I'm in the state of California right now, but there are overlays in some states.
Mhm.
There are some, and it touches various aspects of, in my particular case, trauma cleanup. And in different departments cover the licensing. In our case, in California, it's the Department of Public Health. That's who we answer to for our license. But there are some professionals in our space that are drafting really good laws. Or what are they? They're bills at this point, right, Jess?
Yeah, they're bills at this
Yes.
point.
Yeah, they're bills at this point. And there's a really good, strong one that is going on in New Jersey right now. But again, see, that's state level. No one's picked it up to the federal level.
Don, like the funeral industry has several associations that advocate on the behalf of individuals in the funeral industry, NFDA, OGR, like there's a bunch out there. Is there an equivalent for the cleanup industry? Is there the National Association of Trauma Cleanup
There is.
Professionals?
It's called ABRA. It's an acronym, but if you look it up, ABRA, yeah, that is a small organization. Is it the size of funeral industry? Absolutely not. Here's kind of what's gone on between Jess and I in picking up the sword on this. We've just started. We're not even
Mhm.
after a year. We're not even 3/4 of a year invested into this and pushing. That's the place where the biggest voice can come, I think, is funeral industry. And that's sort of like why we sort of have collided here to be able to take this out. And then certainly what you're doing, the great work you're doing too. It's like, hey, let's start getting the voice out there and waking up the public. And that's really what I think it's going to take. And certainly to get, perhaps maybe the right celeb on board too. This is not on my watch.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where Jess and I are right now. And thank you
Okay.
for this podcast. Right.
Now, if people want to learn more about the bill, if they want to read it, if they want to offer feedback on it, where do they find it? How do they get in touch with you?
You can always email me. I'm sure, Adam, you can drop my email in
Yeah.
to the description of the podcast. Feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to talk to people. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of stuff on there as well. You can hit me up there. I'm very open to talking to anyone who has any interest in trying to help us with this fight, because I really do believe that there needs to be some kind of regulation on this whole entire world of social media photos thing. And it's part of the whole concept too of how many times have you been in a car and you've driven past a major car accident and you see that idiot who has his phone out taking photos as they drive by?
Mhm.
What is that necessary for you to do? That person should be at least fined for that kind of stuff. You are invading into somebody's freaking horrible day
Mhm.
with your stupid phone. Like, there's no need for this. And part of it is the whole world of like shock trauma and like how that whole space has become so big on the internet. Like, there are whole Facebook groups and like web pages that are dedicated to literally gore and shock value.
Mhm.
And it's frightening. I mean, I've seen people get hired at funeral homes that are taking photos inside the coolers and like, yes, they're being fired for it like as soon as it's found out about, but these are things that are happening, and because once they're on the internet, there's no stopping it. It's just something that has so much value that if we are able to find a way to like really prosecute people that are doing this, it may start curbing some of the problem.
And I think that is one of the issues. In media, there's the saying, "If it bleeds, it leads," and that's really where this is leading to. You talk about the response, so I think that we can all agree that there has to be something in place that prevents people from doing this. Have the two of you, of the people that you've collaborated with, discussed what that potential penalty might be? Because without having some sort of teeth, without having a mechanism in place, you know, encouraging people to be more respectful isn't necessarily going to get the job done. So
Right.
what are some of the teethy punishments that you guys are considering?
One of the cool pieces, and I'll let you sort of expand on this, but one of the
Yeah.
cool, and I will keep this short. One of the cool pieces that's going on with what we've read in the New Jersey bill is there's an attachment to it that actually kind of calls that out. It's also saying, hey, in New Jersey, we should have a standard for how we go trauma clean and what trauma cleaners how they should be certified. But in addition, it also says, and if photos are going to be taken, there should be a penalty for this. So, Jess, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah. So, I have in discussion with different lobbyists from all over, kind of both in DC and here in California. It has been very like all over the place. I've heard first offense should be like a misdemeanor and a $500 fine. And I was like, cool, like whatever. Like most people are going to be like, okay. I've even heard a couple of people be like, it should be a felony right off the start because it's seriously invading into somebody's space and like you're really creating a lot of trauma for someone. And so I don't know that we have that narrowed down quite yet because
Mhm.
there's so much emotion involved in this conversation that we really need to kind of bring it to a point where we have to take emotion out of it and realize like legally
Yeah.
what does that look like as far as, how do you prosecute and punish somebody that's doing this?
Yeah, and
Because
I think, and sorry to cut you off. I mean, this is going back to the legal background that I have. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, and I think that we may need to consider what the difference is between the individual that was driving by in their car taking a photo as a regular individual citizen seeing something and texting it to their friend versus someone who is a
Yeah.
professional that is responding to a specific
Yeah.
scene and
yeah,
monetizing off of their profession. So maybe
right.
that's
Very
something
good
for
point.
everybody to consider.
Very good point, Adam. Yeah. Drill it down
Yeah.
that way. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That is what it is. It's when you have the job that goes in and does this and you're taking it from your job. I mean, listen, we know a lot of professionals that do take the photos. It isn't about really even if you took the photo, it's what you did with it. That's really the
Mhm.
deeper problem. And if listen, in funeral response or first responders, sometimes it's part of our way of dealing with the process. It's hard sometimes what we see. So if you turn
Mhm.
to your, fellow professional and go, God, look how this one was. It kind of is almost kind of helps you, but it's what you do beyond that.
Mhm.
It's
I
what you
don't
do
even
beyond that.
yeah. I know funeral directors who take photos of, like, cases that they've worked on as far as before embalming and, doing any restoration work, and then after the fact. I'm in the space of I don't think it's okay. I think that, like, at some level, there is the possibility that that photo could end up off of your phone somehow. Like, we're dealing with a world of clouds, right? Like, this isn't a hard document that you've got stuffed in a drawer that Polaroid style. And so I think that for me, once that photo is taken, if it's for like any kind of like processing for insurance claims and that kind of stuff, once it's like sent and received from the other party that needs it, it should be deleted. Like it should be gone. Like there should no record of that should be on your phone at all.
Mhm.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right.
Agreed. Agreed.
There's clearly a lot for us to discuss. One final word from each of you. What's something we should have talked about today that we didn't? Don, you first.
Actually, I think we did a phenomenal job as a team here. And thanks for your leadership in this, Adam. And Jess, forget it. You picked up that sword immensely. So I think you
Appreciate that.
really nailed it, actually, Adam. There's nothing lost here
All
for
right,
me.
Jess, any last words?
For me, I'm looking for anyone who wants to help us with this fight. So, like, if you are interested, reach out to either Don, Adam, or myself. We'll get you connected to the right people, which would be like me and Don right now. But I do feel like there's something here that needs to be really dealt with. I just don't want any more family members going through the process of like finding photos of their horrible day on the internet. Like, it's just, yeah, it's something we really need to work on as a society of taking care of each other, because ultimately we're responsible for taking care of each other, and that's not taking care of each other.
Agreed. All right, now, if this conversation resonated with you, we urge you to read the full proposal and share it. We will link to it in the podcast episode notes. If you want to get more involved with the Dignity in Death and Privacy Protecting Act of 2025, reach out to Jess, reach out to Don. You can reach out to Buried in Work. We'll happily put you in touch. It's a proposed federal law that would make it a crime to publicly share graphic trauma scene photos or videos involving a deceased person without the next of kin consent. Talk about it in your communities, bring it to your associations, your organizations, your legislators. This is actually a very important issue that we all need to tackle. And with that, we will see you on the next podcast. Don, Jess, it was great to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Buried in Work podcast. Remember, you can save 10% on our estate preparation package and games with code podcast10 at buriedinwork.com.